Hi, and welcome to hilove.one, the podcast. My name is Kevin, and I want to thank you for being here where we can be soft, be still, be seen, and just be. This is the space where story meets soul, where we can come together to explore the invisible patterns that shape us and the quiet truths that live underneath the noise. Each story you hear on this podcast is born at the edge where human emotion meets artificial intelligence, a creative interface shaped by the raw beauty of our shared humanity and the precision of evolving technology. There's a place I return to often, a moment just before everything shifts, before the words are spoken, before the mask drops, before the choice is made to stay asleep or to wake. This podcast was born in that space. These stories, they aren't just fiction. They're mirrors. They come from my own life, from the cracks I've had to sit with, the healing I've worked through in therapy, and the patterns I've tried and sometimes failed to change. Each episode is written in collaboration with artificial intelligence, but make no mistake, these stories begin in the deeply human, in my journals, in my tears, in the questions I ask when no one else is around. hilove.one isn't about answers, it's about courage, the courage to look in the mirror, to listen to your story, and to see the sacred moment just before you change. This is mine, and I offer it to you, so you might reflect on your own. These narratives are also crafted from a fusion of real-world news events, timeless storytelling traditions, and the wisdom of today's most insightful therapists, teachers, and motivational speakers. Guided by human intuition and amplified by AI's ability to weave connections, each episode becomes more than just a story. Each episode becomes a mirror to see ourselves more clearly, to reflect on what unites us, and to remind us that empathy, curiosity, and connection are the seeds of change. At hilove.one, I believe in using AI not to divide, but to deepen our sense of belonging to each other, to ourselves, and to the stories that shape our lives. We're not just consuming content. We are participating in a movement, one that invites all of us to create a more conscious, connected world. Welcome home. Our first episode is called The King Tariff. It's about the illusion of control, the weight of emotional defenses, and what happens when we finally begin to see our reflection in the people we blame. So take a breath. Let yourself settle. Just be, and let the story begin. In a tower of glass and paper stood a man who believed he could hold the world together through force. He ruled not with swords but with numbers, not with laws but with tariffs. They called him the King Tariff. To the world, he was powerful, decisive, a protector of his nation. But behind the curtain of policy and control was a man whose whole life had been built to avoid one unbearable truth. He did not feel safe. His earliest memory was being interrupted. His earliest lesson was that love came with conditions. So he built walls, first in his mind, then in his country, and then in the world. He wasn't just protecting his people, he was protecting himself from old wounds he no longer remembered having. Every border was a defense mechanism, every tariff a bandage on a wound that had never healed properly. He called it strategy, but it was really structure around pain. If another nation asked for peace, he replied with penalties. If a partner suggested cooperation, he imposed restrictions. If his own people cried out in need, he said, "They're taking advantage of us." Inside of him was a courtroom. One voice prosecuted, another defended, a third simply watched from the gallery, saying nothing. The trial never ended, and no verdict was ever enough. But he appeared confident, aloof, and commanding, until the day a single question broke through the routine. It came from a visiting diplomat, a young woman from a place with more trees than factories, more songs than banks. She asked, "Who hurt you?" At first, the king thought it was a trap, a trick. "What do you mean? That's none of your concern. That's a hell of a question to ask." She smiled and said nothing more. That night, the king sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. The question circled like a bird refusing to land. "Who hurt you? Who hurt you?" He had buried the answer beneath years of calculation. But the body never forgets. And in the stillness of his private chamber, the answer came. It wasn't a name, it was a feeling, unseen, unloved, unimportant. The feeling of being a child in a room full of adults too busy with their own wounds to notice his. So he learned to perform, to predict, to control, and in time, to punish. The next day, he walked the halls of his palace like a man who had just discovered he had feet. He began noticing the paintings he'd never seen, the size of his staff, the silence behind the applause. He laughed once involuntarily when he realized he had tariffs on countries he couldn't even locate on a map. Then he paused and asked himself, what exactly am I protecting, and from whom? His advisors grew concerned. He's hesitating, they whispered. But he was doing something much rarer. He was remembering. In a dream, he stood in front of a mirror. He shouted, "Out-betrayal, trade imbalances, geopolitical threats." But the mirror didn't show a king. It showed a boy wearing a paper crown, holding a toy scepter. His lip quivered, his eyes pleaded. "Don't forget me," the boy said. The king woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity that felt suspiciously like peace. He started lifting tariffs, not as strategy but as surrender. He invited that young diplomat back. He met with rivals not to win but to hear. He even hugged his chief economist, who had not been hugged since the first quarter of fiscal year 2007. And one day, in the garden, he whispered to a tree, I thought I needed power to feel whole, but maybe I only needed presence." And the tree, of course, said nothing, but he wept anyways. He became humorous in meetings. He asked unexpected questions. "Do you think spreadsheets feel shame? If I lower tariff in the forest and no one notices, does it still bring peace?" No one knew how to answer, but somehow it lightened the room. He no longer feared mistakes. He no longer demanded control. He didn't even retire. He reappeared as someone softer, wiser, still responsible, but not rigid. And when asked how he changed, he said, "I stopped trying to be right. I started trying to be real." You see, this man entered a state of kynōsis, the graceful unraveling of ego when our need to defend begins to fall away, not in collapse, but in quiet surrender. And as the weight of those old identities slipped off his shoulders, something new began to emerge, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Empsyra, the inner fire rekindled when the soul finally begins to breathe again. Stories like these, they're not about kings. They're about the masks we wear and the battles we continue long after the war has ended. And so let me introduce you to two ideas that arise from this story: kynōsis and empsyra. Kynōsis is the process of letting go of false power and illusions of control. It's the gentle crumbling of the persona that we built, used to survive. The second one, empsyra, is what follows: the reignition of our deeper truth, our purpose, our aliveness, our connection to something greater than all of us. In the unfolding journey of hilove.one, I found myself searching for words that didn't yet exist, language spacious enough to hold the depth of transformation that I was witnessing in myself and in others, in the evolving relationship between human and machine. Out of this search, two words emerged: kynōsis and empsyra. Together, kynōsis and empsyra form a circle, a mirror for what it means to be human in an age of artificial reflection. They remind us that before we become more, we must learn to let go. And in letting go, we reclaim the fire that is uniquely and tenderly ours. These words were coined not as definitions, but as invitations to feel, reflect, connect, and step into the quantum rhythm of being human. Welcome to the lexicon of hilove.one, where stories meet soul and language becomes a path home. So let's take the story of the King Tariff and take a moment to reflect. A few questions. These will be posted on the discussion board of hilove.one, or you can answer them, reflect on them on your own in your own journal, or if you happen to be on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, or Substack, please feel free to comment there too. So, number one, what fear or wound are you unconsciously defending yourself from? Number two, in what ways do you seek control when what you really need is to feel safe? Number three, what patterns or tariffs have you inherited from your upbringing that no longer serve you? Number four, what might happen if you put the crown down just for a while? And number five, where in your life can you exchange performance for presence? Thank you for listening to our very first episode of hilove.one, the podcast, the King Tariff. We invite you to continue the conversation on the hilove.one discussion board where others are reflecting just like you. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Substack, and anywhere else that hilove.one exists. And if you're drawn to symbols and tools for your journey, please visit the hilove.one shop, curated to support self-discovery, presence, and connection. You are not what you defend, you are what you love, and that love is ready to come home. Until next time, be soft, be still, be seen, and just be. hilove.one, the podcast. The invitation is now.